Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Giribhara Dhari. Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Yamunantira Vana Chari. Yamunantira Vana Chari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Giribhara Dhari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Giribhara Dhari. Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Yamunatira Vanachari. Yamunatira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Giribhara Dhari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. जय विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिवजकाचार्य अष्टोत्तर शत श्री श्रीमद ऐसी भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी श्री प्रभुपाद की। जय विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिवजकाचार्य अष्टोत्तर शत श्री श्रीमद भक्ति सिद्धांत सरस्वती ठाकुर श्री प्रभुपाद की। अनंत कोटि वैष्णववृंद की। नाम श्री श्री हरिदास ठाकुर की। प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद की। श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गोप गोपीनाथ श्याम कुंद राधा कुंद गिरि गोवर्धन की। वृंदावन धाम की, मथुरा धाम की, मायापुर धाम की, नवद्वीप धाम की, गंगा माई की, यमुना माई की, तुलसी देवी की, भक्ति देवी की, समवेत भक्त वृंद की। All glories to the Assembly Devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the Assembly Devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the Assembly Devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vikasa Swami Niti Namine. Kalki Prabhu, you want to cast it? Ayala did it. Okay. Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Okay. Reading from chapter 4, text number 22. It's a chapter entitled, actually I don't have the title on here. What is this? It's the process of creation. Process of creation. It's okay. Prajodita yena pura saraswati vitanvatajasya satim srinitim hridi swa lakshana pradhur pradhurabhut kilasyatah sa me rishinam rishabha prasidatam prachoditayena pura saraswati vitanvatajasya satim smritim hridhi swalakshana pradhurabhut kilasyatah samerishinam rashabha prasidatam prachoditayena pura saraswati vitanvatajasya satim smritim hridhi स्वलक्षणा प्रादुरभूत किलाश्यतः समे ऋषीणां ऋषभः प्रसीदताम् प्रचोदितायेन पुरा सरस्वती वितन्वताजस्य सतीं स्मृतिं हृदि स्वलक्षणा प्रादुरभूत् अभूत् किलाश्यतः समे ऋषीणां ऋषभः प्रसीदताम्. Please repeat. Mataji's. Anyone else? Okay. Prachodita, inspired. Yena, by whom? Pura, in the beginning of creation. Saraswati, the goddess of learning. Vitanvata, amplified. Ajasya, a Brahma, the first created living being. What's happening? Oh, okay. Sating Smritim, potent memory. Hridi, in the heart. Swa, in his own. Lakshana, aiming at. Pradurabhut, was generated. Kila, as if. Asyataha, from the mouth. Saha, he. Me, unto me. Rishinam, of the teachers. Rishabhaha, the chief. Prasidatam, be pleased. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Okay. May the Lord, translation, may the Lord, who in the beginning of creation amplified the potent knowledge of Brahma from within his heart and inspired him with full knowledge of creation and of his own self, and who appeared to be generated from the mouth of Brahma, be pleased with me. Purport. As we have already discussed herein before, the Lord as the super soul of all living beings, from Brahma to the insignificant ant, endows all with the required knowledge potent in every living being. A living being is sufficiently potent to possess knowledge from the Lord in the proportion of 50/64 or 78% of the full knowledge acquirable. Since the living being is constitutionally part and parcel of the Lord, he is unable to assimilate all the knowledge that the Lord possesses himself. In the conditioned state, the living being is subject to forgetting everything after a change of body, known as death. This potent knowledge is again inspired by the Lord from within the heart of every living being, and it is known as the awakening of knowledge. For it is comparable to awakening from sleep or unconsciousness. This awakening of knowledge is under the full control of the Lord, and therefore we find in the practical world different grades of knowledge in different persons. The awakening of knowledge is neither an automatic nor a material interaction. The supply source is the Lord himself, Dhyam Patihi. For even Brahma is also subject to regulations of Supreme Creator. In the beginning of creation, Brahma is born first without any father or mother, because before Brahma there was no other living beings. Brahma is born from the lotus which grows from the abdomen of Garbhodakshayi Vishnu, and therefore he is known as Aja. This Brahma or Aja is also a living being, part and parcel of the Lord, but being the most pious devotee of the Lord, Brahma is inspired by the Lord to create, subsequent to the main creation by the Lord. Therefore the agency of material nature. Through the agency of material nature. Therefore, neither the material nature nor Brahma is independent of the Lord. The material scientist can merely observe the reactions of material nature without understanding the directions behind such activities, as a child can see the actions of electricity without any knowledge of the powerhouse engineer. This imperfect knowledge of material scientists is due to a poor fund of knowledge. The Vedic knowledge was therefore first impregnated within Brahma, and it appears that Brahma distributed the Vedic knowledge. Brahma is undoubtedly the speaker of Vedic knowledge, but actually he was inspired by the Lord to receive such transcendental knowledge, as it is directly descends from the Lord. The Vedas are therefore called Apaurusheya, not imparted by any created being. Before the creation, the Lord was Narayana Paro Vyaktat, and therefore the words spoken by the Lord are vibrations of transcendental sound. There is a gulf of difference between the two qualities of sound, namely prakrita and aprakrita. The physicist can deal only with the prakrita sound, or sound vibrating in the material sky, and therefore he must know that the Vedic sound recorded in symbolic expression cannot be understood by anyone within the universe unless and until one is inspired by the vibrations of supernatural aprakrita sound, which descends in the chain of disciplic succession from the Lord to Brahma, from Brahma to Narada, from Narada to Vyas, and so on. No mundane scholar can translate or reveal the true import of the Vedic mantra, hence they cannot be understood unless one is inspired or initiated by the authorized spiritual master. The original spiritual master is the Lord himself, and the succession comes down to the sources of parampara, as clearly stated in the 4th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. So unless one receives the transcendental knowledge from the authorized parampara, one should be considered useless, nishphala mataha, even though one may be greatly qualified in the mundane advancements of arts or science. Shukadeva Goswami is praying to the Lord by the dint of being inspired from within, by the Lord, so that he could rightly explain the facts and figures of creation as inquired by Maharaj Parikshit. A spiritual master is not a theoretical speculator like the mundane scholars, but he is Shrotriyam Brahmanishtham. Om Jnana Timrandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurinatamina Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupakidam Mayam Datati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Tapatakamelam Shri Gurum Vaishnavam Shri Rupam Sagatam Sagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadhuitam Savitam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamsha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishabhanusute Devi Pranamami Haripe Vanchakalpataruvesha Kripa Sindhu Bhyo Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namaha Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vikasa Swamnita Namane Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamnita Namane Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharya Nirvisesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desatarya Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrindam Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare. Okay, so speaking on these last few verses now, we're at the end of the 4th chapter. And so Shukadeva Goswami, he's describing the process of creation. And in order to do so, as he's describing here, that he is praying for that inspiration within the heart, from within his heart, and inspire him with full knowledge. Well, that's Brahma, but who's beginning, may that Lord also inspire me, as Prabhupada is saying at the end of the purport here. So, main points that Srila Prabhupada is making here, you'll see, is this aspect of knowledge. And Mahotsa Prabhu has given a great lecture on the Lord, how the Lord is the intelligence principle. A few weeks ago, such a nice lecture. Everyone can re-listen to it if they want to. If they want to, there's a lot of verses he quotes and that are very useful, and one can get a nice understanding. And so he went over some of those aspects. So, intelligence is meant to, one is meant to acquire knowledge. But by his intelligence, he acquires knowledge and uses that knowledge, jnana vijnana. So he uses that knowledge in practice. So Prabhupada is mentioning here that how the super soul within the heart, he is inspiring the living entities, or is the principal actor within the living entities to give them the knowledge by which to act. So as Prabhupada says, as we have already discussed herein before, the Lord, as the super soul of all living beings from Brahma to the insignificant ant, endows all with the required knowledge potent in every living being. So it's like a very interesting understanding that the scientists don't have, as Prabhupada was mentioning later, that just like the turtles, they're never taught how to swim. The turtles, they get their eggs are laid on the sand in the beach, and once they're born, once they come out of their eggshells, they just hop right into the ocean. And the ocean is a big, it's such a humongous thing with so many waves and so many living creatures within the ocean. But these living entities are able to, function. They start walking straight into the ocean and start their process of life. So that's one living being, and then there's so many others, and so many other living entities that are just born, and they don't have to be taught how to do that activity that as naturally they're engaged in. Just like a child, he doesn't have to be taught that he has to suck the mother's breast when he comes out. He naturally does it. But because the understanding with the atheistic science is that you have to be taught everything. You have to be taught all these things. But we see in nature that all these living entities are gaining knowledge just from being born. The birds don't have to go to school of how to go and find food. The turtles don't have to go and learn how to swim. It's there naturally. The Lord has naturally inspired the living entity from within the heart to go and, act according to its nature in order to carry out that karmic activities that they have to do. So Lord gives inspiration from within the heart for them to do that. So a living being is sufficiently potent to possess knowledge from the Lord in the portion of 50, 64th, or 78% of the full knowledge acquirable. Since the living entity is constitutionally part and parcel of the Lord, he is unable to assimilate all the knowledge that the Lord possesses himself. So, mama ivam so jivalokya jiva bhuta sanatana. So the living entity, he is a part and parcel of the Lord. So his knowledge, because he's part and parcel, just like Prabhupada often gives the example that just like the sun, it can't, even though if it's covered by the, it seems like it's covered by the clouds, the sun itself is never actually covered. It is always effulgent. It is always fully radiant. But the living entity, just like if it's a small light that's going on, then you can cover it and it won't have much impact. Whereas the sun will have impact everywhere else but that little area. So the living entity, he becomes covered by the cloud of material nature. Whereas the Lord cannot become covered because he is fully potent. So obviously we have the opening verse of Srimad Bhagavatam, Janmadhyasya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Janmadhyasya Yato Anvaya Ditaras Charteshu Bhigyaswarat Tene Brahma Hridayadi Kave Muhyanti Yat Suraya Tejo Varimradam Yatha Vinimaya Yatriti Sargamasha Dhamna Swena Sada Nirashta Kuvakam Satyam Param Dhimahi. So that the Lord, he is, well, this is the verse Prabhupada's quoting as well, that Shukadeva Goswami is mentioning that the Lord inspired Brahma from within the heart. Tene Brahma Hridaya Adi Kave. So within the heart, Tene Brahma Hridaya Adi Kave, Muyanti Yat Suraya. So the Lord is able to inspire from Brahma within the heart to act, although Brahma himself is purely intelligence. He's a very intelligent living entity, but he could not understand the process of creation or what to do or what his purpose in his existence actually was. So he's born on this lotus flower, and he's looking in the four directions, and he doesn't know what to do. So he climbs down the lotus flower, and he never reached. There's just like no end to that stem that's going down. So he comes back up, and he hears the sound tapo, so he meditates. I believe that, and then he meditates, and then the Lord inspires from within him within the heart to this whole process of creation, of how to bring about that creation. Sorry, I don't know why I'm getting notifications. So the audio is traced. So the audio is weird apparently. So I don't know why. Maybe it's not plugged in properly. And so the Lord, he inspires Brahma within the heart. So similarly, we understand from Bhagavad Gita that Ishvara Sarva Bhutani Hridayarjuna Tishtati Brahmayan Sarva Bhutani Ani Mayaya. So that the Supreme Lord is situated within everyone's heart, O Arjuna, and is directing the wanderings of all living entities who are seated as on a machine made of the material energy. So the Lord, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as the super soul in the heart, is too loud or something? Yeah. Okay. The Supreme Personality of Godhead within the heart, he is inspiring the living entities. He is directing their wanderings. So he is giving them knowledge that Jnanam Apohanam Cha, that I give them knowledge and remembrance and forgetfulness. So this aspect of knowledge is all coming from the Lord. It is completely, actually, we're not at all competent to do anything, because we are actually completely, utterly dependent on the super soul in order to act, because he is the principle of our intelligence. So this potent gain knowledge, well, Prabhupada says before that, in that condition state, the living entity is subject to forgetting everything after a body change known as death. This potent knowledge is again inspired by the Lord from within, from the heart of every living being, and it is known as the awakening of knowledge, for it is comparable to awakening from sleeping or unconsciousness. So then we understand from Bhagavad Gita also that the soul is traveling like this, but the super soul, he remembers everything, as Krishna says to Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita, Vedaham samatitani vartamanani charjuna bhavishani cha bhutani mam tu veda na kaschanaha. That he says, I remembered, so that the Lord in the heart is eternally blissful, full of body of knowledge, is fully aware of all that has happened in the past, that which is going on in the present, and also that what will happen in the future. But in spite of his being the shelter of both the Paramatma and Brahman, persons with poor fund of knowledge are unable to understand him as such. So So Vedaham Samititani, let me bring this up here also. That he's known everything that has happened in the past, and that he'll know everything in the future. Whereas the living entity himself, he's subject to forgetfulness. Well, that's also the mercy of the super soul, because if we were to remember all our past lives, that would be quite hellish. Even for people to remember their traumas within this life is so hellish that they can't live through their whole life. What to speak of remembering, having knowledge of all the lives that we've been through. So these people that claim to know all, oh yeah, I remember my past lives and such, are actually really foolish. Because if they did, they wouldn't be able to live actually. Because the amount of pain and suffering one would feel by remembering their lives like this would be so intense that he wouldn't be able to live. There's so many cases of people actually leaving their body from just intense mental pain. Either committing suicide themselves or actually just the heart not being able to handle such feelings. There's so many cases like that. So one is meant to understand this fact that the living entity, he is subjected to becoming covered by the material energy. He's consistently at every moment in his life, actually, he's covered by the material energy completely. Obviously, because his desire to lord it over the material energy. And that is the duty of the super soul also, is to provide that desire of the living entity. The living entity desires a particular body. So the super soul guides, he guides the wanderings of the living entity. So you desire to do such and such in the next life. So okay, the super soul arranges a body in such a way that you can try to enjoy like that. So in the other text, 1861, Prabhupada has a nice purport to this. Arjuna, every purport is nice, but here, this is specific to the topic. Arjuna was not the supreme knower, and his decision to fight or not to fight was confined to his limited discretion. Lord Krishna instructed that the individual is not all in all. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, or he himself, Krishna, the localized super soul, sits in the heart directing the living being. After changing bodies, the living entity forgets his past deeds, but the super soul, as the knower of the past, present, and future, remains the witness of all its activities. Therefore, all the activities of living entities are directed by the super soul. The living entity gets what he deserves and is carried by the material body, which is created in the material energy under the direction of the super soul. As soon as a living entity is placed in a particular type of body, he has to work under the spell of that bodily situation. A person seated in a high-speed motor car goes faster than one seated in a slower car. Though the living entities, the drivers may be the same. Similarly, by the order of the super soul, material nature fashions a particular type of body to a particular type of living entity to work according to his past deeds. The living entity is not independent. One should not think himself independent of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The individual is always under his control. Therefore, his duty is to surrender, and that is the injunction of the next verse. Well, then yatameva smaram gaccha sarva bhaven bharata tat prasadat. Maybe this doesn't have all the diacritics. Shantim sthanam prapyasi sashvatam. Also, verse, surrender unto him directly. By his grace, you'll attain transcendental peace and the supreme and eternal abode. So here we're seeing that Prabhupada is going along this line. Well, that was 61, but we're seeing in this text, this purport also, that Prabhupada is going along those lines here, that one cannot compare his knowledge to the knowledge of the soul, super soul, or knowledge of the Lord. One who does such a thing is foolish. So Prabhupada is saying here that therefore we find, here we go, the awakening of the knowledge is under the control of the Lord, under the full control of the Lord, and therefore we find in the practical world different grades of knowledge in different persons. This awakening of knowledge is neither automatic nor a material interaction. The supply source of the Lord himself, Dhiyampati, for even Brahma is subject to the regulations from the Supreme Creator. So we must understand that the knowledge that even these scientists are getting is not actually by their hard work. Actually, one does not get anything by his hard work, but the benedictions of the super soul. Just like there's so many people who went to school and studied the same course under the same teacher with the same, syllabus, everything the same, but a lot of them couldn't grasp it. You can send the same people to the same universe, people that grew up in the same place, that have a similar type of, disposition. They go to the same school, but a lot of them will, everyone will do different grades. They'll all be at different stages of their knowledge. They'll all get different grades. They'll all take the exam and get different grades, although they were taught the same knowledge. So we must understand that the super soul within the heart, or the Supreme Personality Godhead, He is the controller of our knowledge. He actually has the ability to give us knowledge and to take away that knowledge, that forgetfulness. So it is not by some material interaction, Prabhupada is saying. The awakening of knowledge is neither automatic nor a material interaction. It's such a key important to understand for us devotees, actually, more than even the karmis. I mean, what are they going to understand? But we can understand that our study of Shastra, our study of Krishna consciousness is dependent on the mercy of the Lord. When we're studying, it's not that, by this interaction of my eyes going to the paper and me reading this and using my some level of my logic and discrimination, I'm getting this knowledge. But actually the Lord is endowing this from within the heart. Because a lot of the time we'll read the whole book and we actually won't get the point. And then later, we may read it over again and then actually understand that same point that we thought was insignificant to be completely like the most valuable instruction in our life. So it's clear that the super soul within the heart, he guides the living entity. Therefore, this verse is so important in understanding what to do, in order to get knowledge that is liberating for us. So that's why Krishna in the next verse of the one that I just said of Ishvara Sarva Bhutanam, he says in that next verse that it says, O scion of Bharata, surrender unto him utterly. By his grace you'll attain transcendental peace and the supreme and eternal abode. So it is important to surrender unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Obviously, that also comes by the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But the more we're able to surrender, the more knowledge, the more knowledge we'll gain. The more knowledge Krishna will endow upon us. What is that from? That I will give that light of knowledge, the lamp of knowledge. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita. Yeah, jnana deepena, by which you'll destroy ignorance. By which you'll destroy ignorance. So Krishna will give that from within the heart. Jnana dipena bharata, right? Bhashvata means to destroy, right? That word. Bhashvata, what is this? Do you know this? Jnana dipena. So jnana is knowledge, dipena is light. And then Bhashvata, maybe you can look it up. Okay, I got it here. So jnana is knowledge, dipena with the lamp. Oh, Bhashvata glowing. Sorry, this. So jnana dipena Bhashvata. So that he will endow upon that knowledge which will get us out of the darkness of ignorance, which will give us that light of Krishna consciousness. So the super soul, he grants us that. That's how the wandering of the living entity, we're wandering in so many, as a Brahmande Brahmite Kona Bhagyavan Jiva. Guru Krishna Prasade Pai Bhakti Lata Bija. So that he's directing our wanderings through this Brahmanda, this up and down in this Punarapi Jananam, Punarapi Maranam, going up and down, going up and down. So by the mercy of the spiritual master, one gets the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One gets the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So Prabhupada is making the point here that our knowledge is actually completely dependent on the super soul within the heart. It is fully dependent. It is not correct to think that it is done by some automatic means nor a material interaction. By automatic means, by chance we're getting it? No. Are we just getting it just from reading? No. The super soul is allowing that. The super soul is giving that allowance to receive that knowledge, or he's giving that knowledge. So the supply source is the Lord himself, Diyam Patihi. For even Brahma is also subject to the regulations of the Supreme Creator. in the beginning of creation, Brahma is the firstborn without any father and mother, because before Brahma there was no other living beings. So then he goes on to describe how Brahma is born. So then he says that the material scientists can merely observe the reactions of material nature, and without understanding the directions behind such activities, as a child can see the actions of electricity without any knowledge of powerhouse engineers. This imperfect knowledge of material scientists is due to a poor fund of knowledge. So if one actually considers these scientists' argument for existence, it's actually foolishness to the core. It has no proper basis. It's like, why can't they answer that? How does a living entity know how to, just like a turtle, how does it know to swim into the ocean? How does a living entity that's just come out of the egg know without any sort of, nobody's teaching it, it just runs into that? How does it know that? How is it built? Well, they say, okay, that's the function, that's how they were created, but who created that? How did that function? Did it just come about by chance or something like that? Well, that's what they'll say. Yeah, by all the different materials, they came about by chance. All the different materials formed and such, and they progressed and then they formed into living entities. But who initiated the whole process of creation? Who initiated who initiated that whole process of the Big Bang or the chemical reactions, such and such? There is no consideration of that thing, because they feel that it is too far out to consider intellectual, a person who can actually arrange such thing, intellect design, someone who can actually design the whole universe like this. So the scientists merely observe the reactions of material nature without understanding the direction behind such activities. And Prabhupada says that they're like children. And children are considered less intelligent. They're considered like animals. So one who actually can't see the proper, who doesn't have proper knowledge to see how things are actually going on, he's considered less intelligent. Just like if someone considers the car to move on its own. If somebody considers that the only thing we should study about the car is how it moves, or how the gears move, or how the wheels move, such and such. And if we study all those things, then we'll be able to make a car move. Then the car can move. If we just build it, it'll move. But to neglect the person who's actually driving the car is foolishness. So they just care about the mechanics. Their whole idea is they just care about the mechanics, but they don't understand. It's quite bewildering, and then you can actually see the hand of the super soul in this, how such a simple understanding can go over the heads of these great intellectual persons within this society. It's quite amazing. This simple principle, life comes from life. How can you neglect that principles in science? How can you neglect practical examples and practical, you can actually see it with your eyes compared to just theory? Because theory doesn't mean conclusive. Theory means that it's a possibility. And that possibility is on the basis of a lot of speculations. If you study physics, it's just speculation after speculation. We assume this, therefore, when this works out, if we assume this, okay, that works out. Now let's assume this, and therefore that works out. So many assumptions are made in order to come to the conclusion that everything was created by a Big Bang. So many assumptions. It's actually such a big question at hand. The Big Bang theory, actually, it's not complete. There's so many variations of it, and then there's so many scientists that disagree with that also. But the society's become convinced of it. But you can challenge everyone and anyone on this fact. And that's why Prabhupada says in the beginning of the Bhagavatam that if one studies this Srimad Bhagavatam, one will be able to defeat all atheists without a problem. If one actually studies this Bhagavatam properly. The Lord will impart knowledge from the super soul within the heart. As we read it, as the Bhagavatam itself states that, by reading and recitation, by attending the classes in the Bhagavatam, that the super soul within the heart will be established as an irrevocable fact. So one will get that knowledge purely from the super soul. how to defeat all these, how to establish the Lord, how to be completely inspired in devotional service. So these scientists are actually fools, and we can expose that foolishness very easily, only arguing on the basis of purely life comes from life. You don't have to argue on the basis of anything else. Anything they say goes back to the principle life comes from life. Prabhupada actually, in this devotee presented something to him in scientific. He said, why are you doing this? If you want to present something, everything has to be concrete. We want to argue with them on the basis of life comes from life. We'll defeat them like that on that basis. On the other things, they'll take us for a spin because you don't know. We don't know you don't know the intricacies of quantum theory and the astronomy, because it changes. Even if you studied it, it changes every couple of years anyways. So we don't want to argue with them on the basis of that. We just want to argue on the basis of life comes from life, because with that principle, it proves the existence of God, and it proves that not everything comes from a big bang, that everything is not some chemical arrangement that's happened by some chance. But the foolishness of them, they're so covered up by the material nature that even when we explain such things, they say, oh, because you're just religious, that's why you say it's God. But then give me a better understanding then. They'll say, no, that I don't know. So then Prabhupada would say, then you accept my knowledge. Is it not logical? Is it not intellectual? Does it not have logic, reason, and everything in it? So why are you rejecting? Because they're blind. There's blind faith, but then there's blind disbelief also. There's blindly believing something and then blindly not believing something. The scientists blindly not believe in Krishna consciousness. The scientists blindly shy away from existence of God because they're envious at the end of everything, because they don't want to surrender. But they have a poor fund of knowledge. The Vedic knowledge was therefore first impregnated within Brahma, as it appears that Brahma distributed the Vedic knowledge. Brahma is undoubtedly the speaker of Vedic knowledge, but actually he was inspired by the Lord to receive such transcendental knowledge. So these people will never get proper knowledge. Why? Because they don't have that mood that, like we see Brahma have, that mood of that at least what we're doing, even for what we're doing in that line of Brahma, praying to the Lord for this, praying to the Lord to be engaged in service, praying to the Lord for knowledge. That is not there. Actually, it's interesting is that these people don't believe in God, but even the atheists, it's like, so many cases where when they're about to die, immediately they pray to God. Immediately. Even the scientists, immediately, if there's a God, please help me. So it's actually, it's foolishness, because the living entity's whole, especially the human form of life, is completely centered around God consciousness. It's meant to be. That is the purpose of the body. Just like, the turtle naturally goes into the ocean, the human being, because of his constitutional position, to realize, to become God realized, to become Krishna conscious, then when those difficult situations come, he reverts back to his nature. He immediately goes back to his nature. Just like this, often this point is made that just like this whole feminist war, this feminism is such a big thing. But as soon as there's war, the women, women are taken away and the men are put onto the front lines of the war. Why? Because the nature, when it comes down to when it boils down to when you have difficult situations, then immediately you're ready to revert back to your nature. The body naturally takes that. The nature takes over. So if we're acting according to human nature, it's actually geared towards God realization. It is geared towards serving God. So when you create such a artificial civilization where God is shunned, where God is looked at, those who believe in God are looked upon as less intelligent, because of course, again, different religions don't have complete knowledge. The theology aspect of it, the philosophical aspect of it is so broken. People lose faith, and that in itself also, the super soul is giving that to these different, there's divisions of faith describing the mode of ignorance, mode of passion, mode of goodness. So the scientists, even though their purpose is to come to a level of knowledge, they'll never do that. They'll never come to a level of complete knowledge, Because there is no understanding that they're completely dependent on the Lord. Brahma could understand that. Brahma could understand, oh, actually, I have to meditate. I have to actually come to pray to the Supreme Lord, to actually try to understand what to do. But the material scientists, they don't care about that. They have the aham mama bhava, they have the kartaham iti manyate, that I will do it, I will prove it, I will do all this, I'll prove that God does not exist. That has been their whole push, that God does not exist. So I mean, so many concerns are there for these scientists in terms of God existing. Like this famous scientist I was seeing, that he was saying, well, I don't believe God doesn't exist because you say God is an all good person, but there's so much evil in the world. How do you explain that? Well, the Christians can't explain it. Why did God put someone else here in order to suffer and then go to hell? Well, God did that. Why is he so evil? They can't explain it. But we can see how the living entity creates its own misfortunate situation. We can explain it to them. Come. Therefore, Prabhupada was so heavy on us becoming the leaders of society, us going to the leaders of society and having these philosophical discussions with the great topmost scientists. Actually, you'll see this. I haven't seen Krishna consciousness do it, any devotees from Krishna consciousness do it, but the Muslims are very successful at this. They go out into the street, and although they're, even their Shastra is considered in the mode of, it's like tamasic, like anything. They don't see God as a person. They see God as some being that you cannot describe. You can't say who he is, who he isn't, or what danger he is. They just have no knowledge. He's great, that's all. But they're intelligent in defeating atheists. If you watch some of their videos, they're like very sharp. Or they can get around all of them, and they'll logically, with argument and everything, they'll just capture them. The atheists are like, oh. Or even the Christians, they'll fight. They'll like fight against the Christians, and just like they know the philosophy of Christianity and the theology better than the Christians themselves, and then they'll just defeat them. And it's just like I was like, wow, this is inspiring. And that's why one of the things, apparently Islam is the fastest growing religion in the world. Because they're God exists, and they're very heavy with their philosophy, actually, if you watch them. They're very intellectual, they're very logical in the way they, defeat atheists and prove the existence of God. Now, where they start to go wrong is now when you come to a level of, okay, they can defeat the atheist and they can do all this, but then when it comes to God consciousness, now everything breaks down. That's why the atheists, because they also don't have so much knowledge, they can't argue on that basis. We could defeat them easily. We can prove to them to some extent. You see this with Pandits in the past, that they would establish a philosophy and they themselves would defeat it. So even with them, there's so many questions, like someone like from Islamic tradition, they don't understand reincarnation. So everything breaks down as soon as you start to question some of these things. Then this is like a whole bunch of questions come up that they cannot answer. So then Krishna consciousness, the devotees of Krishna consciousness should actually be more conversant than these people. And then after you've defeated them, we should be able to give them pure spiritual knowledge. Pure understanding of God consciousness, pure understanding of Krishna consciousness, by which everything can be understood. There's no more questions to ask. At one point, one understands the principles and there's no more questions to ask. One should come to that point. That one feels like, Prabhupada, when he approaches spiritual master, he said, I have no other questions but how to serve you. He felt complete. In all the, obviously he himself comes from a Vaishnava family, but it was complete. The Vedic knowledge is complete. It announces that, this Sankirtan movement, it is the benediction of humanity at large. It is the, what is this? Oh my God, I'm forgetting. The knowledge, what is the word that's used? That it endows transcendental knowledge? Vidyavadu Jivanam. Yeah, I'm just like forgetting the translation. Exactly. Let me get it up. So it is the life of all transcendental knowledge. It is the life of our transcendental knowledge. The Srimad Bhagavatam, the chanting of Hare Krishna. So if the atheists can be taught this, if we can defeat them on this understanding of Srimad Bhagavatam, then they can come to this understanding that actually the Lord is the creator of this universe. The Lord is the endower of knowledge. And then they'll be able to excel also in their knowledge of whatever they're doing also. Actually, if they have this pure understanding of Krishna consciousness, they could easily do the rest of these things. They may go on with their activities, but they'll be able to understand how all these activities are working. How is it that the atom is come about? How is it that the atom is, working in the way that it does? How all these quantum mechanic principles are working? All these things will be understood. So, Prabhupada is saying here that the physicists can only deal with prakrita sound or sound vibrated in the material sky, and therefore we must know that the Vedic sound recorded in symbolic expression cannot be understood anyone within the universe unless and until one is inspired by the vibrations of the supernatural aprakrita sound, which descends in the chain of disciplic succession from the Lord to Brahma, from Brahma to Narada, from Narada to Vyasa, and so on. So it's impossible for them to understand this unless they come in touch with the Guru Parampara. This is a very principal point to understand, that they can even study the Bhagavatam. I mean, they can study they've studied, so many philosophers have studied the verses of the Bhagavatam. But only until we get in touch with Srila Prabhupada, until we get in touch with until the pure line of the Guru Parampara, there's no question of getting that knowledge. Because in that pure line of Guru Parampara, the super soul is Chaita Guru. And so one actually comes in touch with by the help of the Chaita Guru, he comes in touch with the disciplic succession itself, and by which then we can start to understand this, the purport of the Shastra. We can start to understand this aprakrita, that supernatural sound. So no mundane scholar can translate or reveal the true import of Vedic mantra. They cannot understand unless one is inspired or initiated by authorized spiritual master. The original spiritual master is the Lord himself, and the succession comes down to the sources of parampara, as it is clearly stated in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter of Bhagavad Gita. So, in the 4th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. So, unless one receives transcendental knowledge from the authorized parampara, one should be considered useless, even though one may be greatly qualified in mundane advancements of arts or sciences. So, at least the students that I approach in the university, I openly tell them that your knowledge that you're getting is temporary. In a few years, you get all these things. In a few years, they'll change it, and it won't be as useful. It won't be so useful. Everything you learned is not so useful. Therefore, you're not happy. Everything you're learning, everything you're doing, in time will completely be taken away. Time I am the destroyer of all. Will completely be destroyed. Therefore, you're not happy. Therefore, nobody is happy in this world, because the knowledge you're getting is completely prakrita. It's material. It's temporary. So, in order to understand that principles of in order to understand the aprakrita, they must come in touch with the line of disciplic succession. They must come in touch with the devotees of the Lord that are pure in their activities, that at least have the intention of purity. Now, may not be pure in our activities, but we have the intention of purity. So then we'll be able to inspire them to take up devotional service. Then that will be a good judgment of our Krishna consciousness. How many people are we able to inspire to take up Krishna consciousness? That is, Bhaktivinoda Thakur often said that we can judge a Vaishnava by how many other Vaishnavas he makes. So, because if we're pure in our activities, people will be able to see that. And, like Vishnuchitta Prabhu was saying that our Guru Maharaj, he instructed him that don't try to impress. Don't try to impress. Just speak as it is. Why? Because if we just speak as it is, if we just speak what we know and what we've heard from our spiritual master, we will inspire others. The super soul will inspire them to take up devotional service. Because we're giving the message as it is. We're giving the message as it is. And to the level of our purity, we'll be able to also bring others to the level of Krishna consciousness. So we should actually desire to be pure devotees for the benefit of others. For the benefit of others. That is our whole mood. We're trying to become pure for the benefit of others, not for myself. oh Krishna, please help me. It's just like the way that Brahma prayed, or that the way that Shukadeva Goswami is praying. Oh Lord, please help me so that I can give me proper knowledge by which I can, let go of my anarthas. So I can come to the level of pure devotion. So others will be inspired to come to others will be inspired to come to your lotus feet. Just like Srila Prabhupada, just by seeing him, just by hearing him, people were completely inspired. So we don't try to, it's also speaking for myself, we're trying not to impress. We just speak as it is. It's not some mundane thing, as Prabhupada is saying in this purport. It is not by mundane interaction. It is not by chance. It is not anything like this that somebody is becoming a devotee. It is completely done by the Lord. Somebody who takes up devotion service, it is completely helped by, he's completely under the control of the Lord. And so if we're able to, dedicate ourselves in Krishna consciousness and be surrendered to the Lord, then he will inspire so many others, because he'll help us fulfill that desire to serve him. The Lord serves his devotee to serve him. It's like Prabhupada says in some purports that there's a transcendental fight between the devotee and the Lord in who can serve who better. So we can receive this. We have the great wealth of the Guru Parampara. We can realize this. We have how much of a wealth this is. This was something that when Avadhu Chandra Prabhu, that day you got initiated, I remember it so clearly, walking into that door in that back room and seeing you and getting ready. You went like your Guru Maharaj was giving you initiation, and seeing that, and it's like it left a eternal impression in my mind now. That feeling of, wow, this is such a rare thing. This is I wasn't initiated at that point. But seeing that, I was just like, this is such an amazing feat. Like, wow, we've finally made it. Like, this is it's time to go back home, back to Godhead. It's like this Guru, how rare the line of our disciplic succession is, the great stalwart acharyas, all these amazing personalities, and we are a part of that. As my Guru Maharaj says, we are the part of that lion parampara. So it's such a amazing. We're in the best position we can be in, and we can make full use of that by helping others understand this, by giving this science to others. That is our duty now. So unless one receives the transcendental knowledge from an authorized parampara, we are that authorized parampara, as long as we're following the principles. It's not like, the principle is not like Ritvikism. It's like, okay, there's Prabhupada and then everyone else. But it's like that parampara follows on. So we continue that. We are a part of that. We are authorized in that parampara. So we're acting on the behalf of the parampara. So when we're out there, we're acting on the behalf of them. Therefore, when we give them the Hare Krishna mantra, obviously we're not initiating them. And in one sense, that's there in tradition like that. But we're giving them a proper link we're giving them the link of parampara. We're the instruments that create that link for them, because they may have heard the Hare Krishna Mahamantra from so many others, but it won't have the same effect but when he receives it from a devotee. Therefore, it is important when we on the street we teach him the Mahamantra, because they may search something and hear it from some Mayavadi or not, but then if they read Prabhupada's book, they may get a proper conception. But it's always important that we give them like this, so that we link them to the parampara. So when they receive this transcendental sound, they'll actually be able to understand, whether it's then and there or whether it's in it takes some time for that to take effect. So Shukadeva Goswami is praying to the Lord by the dint of being inspired from within by the Lord, so that he could rigidly explain the facts and figures of creation as inquired by Maharaj Parikshit. A spiritual master is not theoretical speculator like the mundane scholar, but is strotriyam brahmanishtam. So the spiritual master, he is completely realized, and he himself, the spiritual master, is always praying. Like we see as Shukadeva Goswami, the parampara, in line of the parampara, the head of the parampara. Head of the parampara means he's very close to, there is Vyasadeva right there, he's his father, and then there's Narada, Brahma. So he's only coming in he's the fourth in the line of parampara. So he himself is praying to the Lord. So our spiritual masters, as we saw Srila Prabhupada always praying to the Lord. We read his poems of when he was on the Jaladuta of praying to the Lord. So in such a there's that at humility at his command, all humility. So we see like that with the spiritual master. So we should do the same thing. We should follow this. We should follow this mood of Shukadev Goswami, praying to the spiritual master, praying to the Lord, to be inspired within the heart. So what I may speak to these people, to the people that are listening, that they may be inspired in their heart to take up devotional service. And with that prayer, we speak what we know. And just like in book distribution, we've had so many experiences ourselves. Just like actually the experience that I had yesterday is quite amazing. I was thinking about it. I was like, that's such an amazing thing that this person came and I was chanting japa, and he was just like talking. He was like, yeah, I used to meditate, and I just kind of felt like I should just call him over and just make him chant. I was like, okay, it's like, hey, I just said, he was like halfway through a conversation with him. I was like, come over here. And then he just came over and I said, here's some beads. I had some in my fanny pack. I had some beads and I gave it to him. He was like, all right, sit. I'm going to teach you how to meditate. And I taught him the mantra. And he started meditating. And then I told him to bring this pamphlet. And so on that pamphlet, there's the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. And then there's Krishna on the other side standing there with his flute. And so the guy is chanting japa on one hand. With his other hand, he's touching the feet of Krishna. He doesn't know it. And then what happens, I'm seeing it and I'm like, wow, this is really amazing. And then he scratches his head like this. And I could understand the Super Soul was inspiring from within the heart to touch the lotus feet of Krishna to his head. And like, this is such an amazing principle, is that like the Super Soul gives knowledge how to surrender to Krishna even when he's hearing proper transcendental sound coming from Parampara. Is that so it's amazing how when we pray to the Lord, because when we chant, every time we get someone to chant that's new, we're always praying to the Lord. Let him please inspiring from within the heart to get proper knowledge. That is our prayer when we're chanting japa along with someone. So just seeing that, like that, wow, the Super Soul is actually inspiring this person to touch the feet of Krishna and then put it to his head. This is wild. I was completely like, I was feeling very happy. I was feeling very blissful by seeing that. And Krishna's actually brings some guy that's just on the street and he touches lotus feet to his head. And he touched it, and then he continued right after that, he didn't put his hand away. He continued he held the feet of Krishna the whole time he chanted the japa. It's just quite an amazing thing, quite unthinkable. So we can always pray to the Lord that what we speak, and when we want to explain Krishna consciousness, that we may not be so learned or so sophisticated in our philosophical understanding, but we can inspire just by simplicity, by explaining what we know in the line of Guru Parampara, what we've heard from our spiritual master. They can completely become transformed. It doesn't require to be a great scholar to make so many devotees. This requires simplicity and surrender. That's the two principles if we can maintain simplicity, surrender. Of course we should have good knowledge of the books, but people will be inspired just by seeing your level of dedication, by seeing your practice. So I'll end my class there. I've gone over a little bit. I have a few minutes to answer questions or have comments. I'm sure Mahotsa Prabhu might be wanting to be there. Anything from Mahotsa? Or maybe we can go on live now and then.
Thank you for the nice class, Prabhu. I have a question. You're saying how our intelligence is dependent on the Super Soul. So how do you know the difference between receiving guidance from the Super Soul and discriminating that between following the dictations of your mind?
It goes back to the principle of love and lust. That principle that is that Krishna, that which is directed towards Krishna is love, and that which is directed towards Maya is lust. So ourselves, that which is directed towards ourselves is lust. So I, me, myself, and I. So it goes back to that principle. Therefore, sincerity is important, right? We have to be able to look ourselves and say, oh, okay, this is not, the desire of the Lord. This is my own independent desire that I have. So it requires intelligence and guidance. Those are the two things. That's why it's important to it's important to stay under authority in order to keep that principle that, okay, this is the desire of the Lord, and I'm carrying out. The Lord is giving me transcendental intelligence, just like you're doing so much of this. Getting these boots and stuff. Now, that's, what are you going to get out of that? It's like, what are you going to get out of getting a bunch of boots? Well, it's quite an inconvenience that a lot of the times they don't reply, they deny you, they have so many problems. It's quite an inconvenience. But going and doing that, and then the Lord gives intelligence on how many events, what kind of events, and then we start to find, in the beginning we're like, oh, there's not so many events, there's this, and then we find there's actually events every week. Even within Atlanta, there's like hundreds of events. And so the Lord starts to give this intelligence by which to work. So it's just the principle to kind of, to not be, it's unmotivated devotional service. Then we can depend on that Lord inspires in our intelligence completely. So that takes some time. That's why we take guidance at all times. And then when we're mature in our devotional service, we continue taking guidance, but then there's a little bit of independence allowed, because we understand that we become purified, and now we can act according to the desire of the Lord and not my own desire. Sorry, Vishnu had something.
Okay, Prabhu, go ahead.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Yes, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Oh, okay. Hare Krishna. So, just one thing. The super soul doesn't have duty, right? Just wanted to
Did I say that?
clarify that. The super soul, yeah, you did say that, and it might have been a slip of the tongue. I mean, because the explanation wasn't like it was as if it was a duty, but you did use that word duty. So super soul, Paramatma, Krishna does not have a duty. He, in the form of the super soul, chooses to perform the two activities as the observer and the sanctioner. Upadrashtanumantasha, the overseer and the and the person who sanctions. So but he doesn't, it's not like his duty.
Yeah, sorry if I misstated that, because I mean the Bhagavatam completely, it's clear in that Bhagavatam that he's abhigya swarat, he's completely independent.
Yeah, but the important point is a slip of a tongue on a small thing like that actually conveys a big philosophical difference.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
So okay, yeah, that was all I had to say.
Okay. Anything else? You have something, Kogi Prabhu?
Hare Krishna. Two things. Two comments. One thing is that you mentioned in the beginning of the class about like if somebody remembers their past life, it's like crazy and it's impossible, something along those lines. But there are like cases, just to clarify, that people do. I mean, if somebody says like
I'm specifically stating like those people who are they come up to you and they're just like, not like sane people.
Yeah, but it's just that it's not like an absolute.
There
are some things. There are studies done into that. The other thing too is that I don't remember the exact name, but there's some book, and pretty much the premise of the book is that I believe it's mostly atheists and scientists who had like some spiritual awakening or whatever, whatever that is. But anyways, it's just interesting that there is like a field of that out there, because you're talking about like scientists and things like that. But there are some that that they are strict atheists and whatever, materialism, and then something happens to them or whatever, then they become whatever, like religious people actually. So
there's those cases with those scientists. Yeah, there's many scientists that are actually religious. And so yeah. And anything else? Mataji's? Okay, anything else for online? Nope. Okay. All right, Srimad Bhagavatam ki